our very first live show. We went right to the top. And fortunately, he had time to join us today. So, Dr. Z, I'll let you do the honors here with the introduction.
Well, I shared with you earlier that I came here on August the 15th to kick the tires, and I met President Kaplan for the first time, and I could just tell halfway through the interview, in a group interview, there's a real connection with this president. And we went into a room afterwards and had a fireside chat, and he hooked me. And part of it was he asked me if he offered the opportunity to teach a literature class with him. We both have a background in that. His is much more extensive than mine. So I got to ride sidecar with him in an honors literature class this fall and see him in his true calling. And that was something really for me, a real joy. So I could go on and on about him, but I'll say this. He's taken this university over the last 16 years from an enrollment of 2,000 to nearly 7,000 and changed the look of the campus. I think our alums that are watching this know exactly what I'm talking about. What he's done with residence life, what he's done with academics, and now what he's trying to help us do with athletics is nothing short of phenomenal. And with that, I'll back up and let the real star, our leader, President Kaplan, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. J-Dub, thanks for inviting me. And Shane, thanks for doing this podcast. You said you can go on, and you were doing a great job, so maybe I should just let you go on and on. I can't praise myself like you did.
Yeah, I did. I only got fourth of the way through it. There's all kinds of stuff on there. We can keep going.
You can be my press agent, Shane.
Yeah.
So President Kaplan, we've heard Dr. Z's side of the story of how he ended up at UNH. I want to hear your side of the story.
Happy to tell you. And I'm going to do so by Shane, by way of another story. So years ago, when I was a department chair of a department of English and foreign languages, reviewing resumes for a hire in Spanish, and it was a very important hire. And I remember I was lying on our couch in the living room going through hundreds of resumes. And all of a sudden I turned to my wife and I said, I just found our person. Now this was a position in Spanish at a school that was 40% Hispanic. And so you would think logically I would be excited about an Hispanic candidate. And there were several, but the one that jumped out at me was a guy who had been at Yale. He was Caucasian. He had run the Hispanic Student Union at Yale as a Caucasian. He wrote one of the most important PhDs that became one of the most important books on Cervantes' Don Quixote. Went on to teach at Mount Holyoke, one of the best private schools in the country. And just before he got tenure, he left there, went to Los Angeles, and with his brother opened a mariachi band in a Mexican restaurant, club, bar type facility, and spent 10 years doing that. And I looked at this guy's resume and I said, there's no way we would normally get someone with these credentials. This guy's one of the best in the country. And clearly, under the circumstances he's looking for a new start, something different to do, something rewarding. He chose us and we chose him. Very similar to what happened to Shane. I'm going through the resumes and I looked at Shane's resume and I said, you must be kidding. This guy is interested in coming here. That someone of this caliber is interested in moving from D1 to D2 to help us get to D1. And from there, among a great pool of candidates, there was only one person I knew we had to hire, and that was Shane Zanger. He's got obviously nationally recognized credentials. He's got an incredible personality, as you're all seeing. He's passionate about his work. And more importantly, and probably most importantly, he's an idealist. And that's why he chose us, because he looked and he said, here's a place I can make a difference. And he's been making a difference ever since.
Now, as President Kaplan, as Shane tells the story, he got there and he's never left. It was that for the whole first week, you guys were just going out and having food. Is that right?
He found my sweet spot. I'm a little bit of a foodie, and he kept recommending, hey, if you stay another day, we can go here and go there. And before you know it, I was hooked.
Shane's like me. Both of us can play golf. People always ask me why I don't play golf, and I say because it takes too much time. And then they say, well, you can raise money on the golf course. And I always say, but I can raise money in a restaurant, and it's just as enjoyable and it's faster. So the two of us spent quite a bit of time. I gave him a grand tour of the restaurants, and now when he walks into any restaurant in the area, they all know him by first name.
That's not far from the truth. My wife came to visit a few times before this permanent move. And the second time we'd gone to the G Cafe, which is one of President Kaplan and my favorites. And we'd been to a place called Lenny's the night before, which I notoriously spent way too much time at. And she goes, people around here seem to know you. Well, I guess I'm not staying at home heating up ramen noodles, but yeah, she kind of caught me. But it's President Kaplan's fault.
Well, we're glad that you're here, Shayan, as one of the newest members of the UNH family, and I am as well. We're still learning about some of the traditions here that go back, in our case, 100 years. President Kaplan, we should say Happy Founders Day to you. Absolutely. But for the people who may not know or may have forgotten their history from the time that they were at school, remind us all, what is Founders Day?
So Founders Day is the celebration of the day the University of New Haven was established 100 years ago. And we're celebrating it today, as we have over the last few years, on the day of the founding, but 100 years later, which is something we're very proud of, very excited about, and hope all of you are as well.
What does it mean to be celebrating Founders Day on its centennial year? Founders Day is special all the time, but what does it mean to be celebrating it here on birthday number 100?
So in particular, it's a moment to reflect. I guess the analogy would be in a marriage, you have an anniversary every year, but there are certain milestones where you stop and you look back and you reflect on what you've accomplished and what the relationship in the case of a marriage has meant to you and your spouse and your family and so forth. At this point in time, we've been building up to this by reflecting a lot on who we are and what we mean to the broader community and to our graduates, but then simultaneously looking at where we're heading. And I think 100th anniversary is a chance to look back and say, we're sustainable, right? We've made it. I was thinking recently about the 100th anniversary of the university. When I was in Virginia, I was the chancellor of the only branch campus of the University of Virginia. We had a football donor, Lee Maud Richmond, and I once asked her how long she had been, I asked her if she started watching football, attending football games. She was a fanatic in her childhood. And she said, oh, no. I didn't start watching football games until probably about 80 years ago. So Lee Maud was 98, not long before she passed away, and we had a birthday party for her. She wanted to make it to 100. And as she cut the cake, I asked her to make a wish, and she looked at me and she said, what do I do? What do I wish for at 98? And I said, ideally for another 98 years that have been as good as the ones we've had. So, as we sit here on our 100th anniversary, we're hoping for another incredibly powerful and meaningful 100 years ahead of us.
I may be stealing one of J-Dub's questions here, but in the 16 years you've been here, what are 2 or 3 of your favorite memories about the institution and the transitions that you've seen ushered in?
Of the stories I can tell?
Yeah, I've heard some of the others, yeah.
As long as I still want to be employed.
Yeah.
I'd have to say probably a couple of the most memorable, and one in particular was, I knew we needed a recreation center. Our students were working out literally in a closet. It was a room that was the size of a walk-in closet with 2 treadmills, a crummy old TV, and the treadmills weren't much better. And it was dark and dingy. And I said, we need to build a recreation center. We didn't have the money. I hired the architects, as Shane knows, before we even had the funds to build it. But I said, we're going to do this and we'll find the money. And we did, and we built it. And that day that it was opening, I was off campus with someone, with a donor, at lunch. And on the way back to campus, as that person was about to get into his car, I said, you know what? I haven't been in the new building since it opened. Let's go over there. So around 2 p.m, weekday, school day. And we walked in and the building was packed. And I looked at this guy and I said, this is eerie. And he said, why? And I said, look at them. I said, you would have thought that this building, or you would think that this building had been here for the last 10 years. The second that door opened, the students flooded in, jumped on the equipment, started working out. It was clear to me that we were on the right track at that point in time. because people had said to me, "Are you sure our student body will use this?" And I said, "This isn't being built for our current student body. It's being built for the future of the university, for the kind of students that we want and need to have here." And we had them, we found out. Similarly, if I think of another important milestone, it was when we opened the campus in Prado. I was there. I had been invited by another university president, a retired college president, to do a joint venture. I checked it out. I saw the facility they were talking about renting. I turned to him and his investor and I said, "You don't want to do this, because if you do, as a for-profit, you're going to be subject to the Italian value-added tax, which will simply consume any profit you could have." I said, "So if you're willing to step aside, I'll give you a finder's fee. We're going to take this over." I turned to the city representative who was at the table and I said, "If you can get this done in the next 6 weeks, we'll give you, the city, something to make it happen." I don't mean this is a bribe, but an incentive. 6 weeks later, we had the campus. We closed the deal. And I went back that fall to visit with the students who were there. Same thing as with the recreation center. All I could think of is, why hadn't we done this sooner? And now that we've done it, it's become a really important part of our DNA. We need a place where our students can study abroad, step out of their comfort zone, and learn more about themselves and the world. So, the real memorable moments for me have always involved students and seeing that we, and I personally, are having a positive impact on shaping them, and through them, shaping the future for all of us.
Of course.
I think that's one of the advantages of being in higher education. Visionaries and leaders in other fields can come up with an idea and eventually see it through. But in higher education, you get to see students show up. And by the way, the rec center is gorgeous for those who haven't seen it, and it continues to be full to this day. And Prado, you had a vision and idea, and then you get to see real people inhabit that vision one day.
Yeah, I'll tell you another one of my favorite stories that embodies why the University of New Haven needs to exist and what kind of difference we make in the world. About 10 years ago, one of our criminal justice majors went along on a study abroad tour, 2 weeks, to France. Faculty member hosted it. He had students from across the campus, and they were standing on a hillside above the beach at Normandy, at Omaha Beach, where the D-Day invasion had, of course, taken place. The professor was looking down at the ocean, as were the students, pointing out various spots. It was incredibly stormy. There were 6, 7, and even 8-foot waves. And all of a sudden, one of the students, he was about 6'2", the criminal justice major, stripped down to his underwear and went racing into the raging sea, literally at risk of his own life. What he had seen was that 2 young parents were on the beach screaming for help, and their 2 young children, ages 10 and 12, young boy and his sister, were drowning. And no one was ready to risk to go out there to save them. This young man, by the time he got to the 2 young people, the boy was unconscious, the girl was close. He, again, at peril of his own life, swam back to shore and saved both of them.
Wow.
And I always say, no matter what, he made an enormous difference as a University of New Haven student. He had been trained in saving people's lives as a criminal justice major, in self-sacrifice. But in addition to saving their lives, for all we know, he saved all of our lives. It could be that one of those students right now is working in a lab that comes up with a cure or a vaccine for this horrible virus. So, every student we train and prepare makes a difference in the world. And because of our emphasis on public safety, engineering, other fields like that, health sciences, we mean a lot to society and to the broader world. And that young man is just one, obviously, of thousands and thousands of examples.
That's incredible. What a story.
Yeah, that's well said, President Kaplan. And certainly it's a great way to sum up the type of high character students, and not just the students, but all employees, I think, at the University of New Haven. I just want to follow up. You brought it up, the coronavirus. We're celebrating this 100th Founders Day safely, virtually at home. It's a Founders Day unlike any other. What updates can you give us on UNH, the coronavirus, and what lies ahead for us?
So I'm glad you asked that question instead of what are the plans for the next 100 years? Because right now I'm focused on the next 100 days. And we've got several contingency planning groups with some of our best and brightest employees working feverishly to make sure that as we go through this incredibly unprecedented crisis, we're prepared for every possible scenario, as much as that's, of course, humanly possible. So our plan is to reopen in August, and probably earlier in August than planned, for various groups, students that need labs, students that need clinical access, possibly athletes. We're looking at making sure that when we open, we can provide as close to the experience students are expecting as possible, recognizing that we won't be able to replicate what we did last summer when we reopened. We'll certainly be limited in how many students can be on campus and how they can interact. So we're planning around that. We want to make sure that if it's a limited number of students, we provide them with an incredibly rich experience, as we always do. We're planning for contingencies if we have to go back online like we are now, that we can do so as well as we're doing it now at an even higher level. We're looking at everything it's going to take until things get back to normal. And as I keep saying, that's not getting back to normal of 3 months ago. It's getting back to a new normal. And what that'll mean for the university, if we do this right, is a new normal that's even better than where we were a few months ago. We don't plan on getting high. We plan on excelling as we get through this process.
President Kaplan, you and I have talked about this multiple times, and I referenced Dave Peterson earlier in the podcast, our one of our football alums who's done so well out there. And when this pandemic first occurred, he talked to me about your leadership over the last 15, 16 years and the entire history in his lifetime of UNH, and that we're overcomers. We have a certain amount of grit to us, and that's the type of student we have. And kind of seeing this as the lack of a better word, an opportunity for a school like ours to do that, show that once again. And I kind of hand that off to you as to your perspective on that.
Yeah, very much so. You really captured it. We would make this our slogan because it can be misconstrued, but we've always been a second chance university. And some of our, in fact, almost all of our really successful graduates were second chance people. They came to us for an opportunity that had been denied for various reasons elsewhere, and they excelled. Those are people that have an incredible amount of persistence and a work ethic that's second to none. They're the ones that are going to help us get through this. And that applies to the employees and to the current student body. We attract people to work here who, like you, Shane, are idealists. I would count myself among them, that believe that making the world a better place is why you get up in the morning.
Yeah.
So our alums, our donors, our faculty, staff, and our students will help us get through this and reach new heights.
We talk a lot about leadership on this podcast, and especially leadership in crisis. And the classes that I teach, President Kaplan, all the students have given you high marks for your leadership during this time of crisis. They say that you communicate with compassion, with empathy, and that you do just a great job of communicating to them, and that you really care about them. What type of a feedback have you received from students or anyone on campus about your leadership during this time?
I'm very proud to say that it's pretty much what you just described. They've been grateful that we're communicating extensively and honestly. I had a town hall meeting with the staff this morning, and I was asked some difficult questions. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I'm being very direct. I think it'd be irresponsible to be anything but. And I used an expression in the town hall meeting. I don't know if I conveyed it properly, but people that are worried about where we are should worry, because if that's all they're doing, they're going to face some problems, right? In other words, if an employee is worried about, is the university going to make it? They might not make it. What we need are people that aren't worried, but that are driven, right? That get it, that getting out of this. And that gets back to what Shane said about one day at a time. I had throat cancer 5 years ago. And it's documentable that it's by far one of the most brutal treatments for any cancer. I mean, I would have to go, excuse me, I would have to stay away from my family. My daughter and her husband and her then 3-year-old grandson were staying with us, and I didn't want them to see what I was going through. And I could only drink a liquid diet. I never drank it in front of them. I'd go into my bedroom and I'd go into the bathroom and I would chug-a-lug one of these just to get my nutrition. And the second I was done, I would slam my hand against the door frame just to release some of the pain. And then I'd get back in bed and start reading again. And eventually I'd go out for my daily walk. And Shane, like me, I'm a daily exerciser. I would maybe not walk as fast as I did, but I would keep pushing. And I got through it damn well, frankly. And I recovered, thankfully, pretty darn well. You take it, as Shane said, as I've said to him, one day at a time. But that doesn't mean you spend that day waiting. You spend that day engaged and acting and focused on what it's going to take to get through the next day. And that's what we need right now. We need people that are willing to confront the truth and then rise to the occasion and do what needs to get done. And that includes our students. So I've not sugarcoated with them that we're facing a really challenging year, both fiscally and educationally. We're not going to be able to give them everything we want. All I can promise them is we'll try damn hard to get close to it.
You know, J-Dub, I've said this to some close friends, and I've said it to President Kaplan. I'm fortunate. I've gotten to work with some of the best and brightest in higher education and athletics over the last 30 years. And I was taught by the man that I consider my second father, Bill Snyder, the legendary football coach at Kansas State. And I've waited almost 30 years to find someone like him. And it's President Kaplan. And what he just described, the one day at a time, the relentlessness, the tenacity of pursuing goals and just going after it day after day after day, is what helped Bill Snyder create what they call the greatest turnaround in the history of college football. Well, I'm not making light of that at all, but in light of what we are facing now and the future of higher education and the university, this is far more important. And to be working with someone of President Kaplan's caliber who takes that approach one day at a time, your relentlessness. What I can say that he can't is, I don't know when he sleeps. There are emails that will come through at midnight and 3:30 in the morning and 5 in the morning, and it's always about UNH and about where we're going and what we're doing. Now, having said that, President Kaplan, I want to ask you, the one day at a time piece helped me so much. You also, in light of what you said about worrying, you told me a story about a movie you saw once that I think it was Tom Hanks. I have not seen it. There's a line in there that's been equally as helpful to me.
Yeah, thanks for the compliment and for the comparison with Bill Schneider. Don't ever let me coach a football team, though.
Well, you probably didn't want to run a university, so you're.
I always thought Get That Quarterback was some guy that was really cheap and just wanted to make more money. So yeah, the movie was, and it's something that when I saw the movie, I was already living by it, and it just reinforced the way it was delivered in the movie. Really got my attention. I think it's called The Bridge of Spies, and Tom Hanks is an attorney in the 50s defending a Russian spy, and there are two scenes where this guy is close to being put to death. One is in a courtroom where he's about to be sentenced for espionage, which was punishable with the death penalty. And at the end of the movie, he's being handed back over to the Russians, who will most likely kill him for treason on the other side. And both times, Tom Hanks has become really fond of this guy, who's not your typical spy, but is just a very unique, kind, compassionate person. Both times that he's close to the death penalty, Tom Hanks turns to him and he says, "Aren't you worried?" And the guy very calmly says, "Will it help?" And that's exactly how I feel about what we're in right now. Is if you're worried about it, you should worry, because that's what you're going to spend your time doing. You got to roll up your sleeves and go for it. And you know, in the 16 years I've been here, I've made a lot of mistakes, but I hope one of them wasn't that I thought too much about things and didn't just do something just to make sure that something got done. And right now, we're doing a lot of thinking and a lot of planning. But in many instances, you got to just pull the trigger and hope you pull the right one, right?
Yep.
Well, Dr. Kaplan, because so many people who are watching and listening to this podcast are not only fans of the university itself, but fans of our athletic department. I know that they're going to have a question, so I'll bring it up. I mean, it's the reason you brought Dr. Z on board. Certainly things might be delayed because of the coronavirus, but still, I'm curious, What is the shared vision you and Dr. Z have for the future of athletics at the University of New Haven?
So I'll give a quick answer, and then I'll let Shane give maybe a little bit more detailed answer. I constantly misquoting a line from the author Hunter S. Thompson, who wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And that's apparently not the quote, but I like it, so I'll just keep using it. I've been asked about the move to Division I, and we hired Shane to get us there, by faculty, by staff, are we still going to do this? And I said, now more than ever, right? When the going gets tough, you got to get moving, and you can't sit and debate and analyze things to death as we tend to do in higher education. So, I've asked Shane to fast track the move, and that's what we're doing, and to expand athletics, which is what he's done miraculously just in the short time he's been here. So, Shane, I'll let you piggyback on that.
Well, that was part of the hook when I went from the meeting with the search committee to the other room with President Kaplan for a fireside chat, was that shared vision and that kind of mentality and that leadership. And I committed to him at the time that I would follow him and the board in their direction. I'm a lifelong lover of higher education. Both my parents were faculty members, and when I told my dad I wanted to be a college football coach, he said that yeah, that's fine. You can do that as long as you get a PhD. You pick what it's going to be in. But he told me that I was 9, and we followed through with that. I only share that with you to say we're on track to do this. We'll find any way we can that benefits the university, and that's really what I've pledged from day one. I believe at this level, this niche we're looking at, which is called FCS Division I, it really is largely enrollment driven and lifts up the institution from that direction. We're not talking about the Power Five. We're not talking about exorbitant amounts of money on that end. It's more about opportunities for more and more students on campus to participate in college athletics and enhance your entire student body and the experience of the other students who get to come participate as fans and band members and cheerleaders and dancers and all the things that go around it, the pageantry of college athletics. I've said from the day I got here, I believe FCS, Division I athletics, is the sweet spot of college athletics. And we're right on the cusp of it right now. I believe UNH, Charger Nation, does Division II better than anyone. And we're right there, just as some of our close peers have made that jump in the last few years, that we are ready and able to follow in their footsteps.
And, J-Dub, one of the thoughts or slogans or whatever phrases that you want to, phrases that has guided my presidency comes from the movie Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Every time someone asks me why I'm doing something, whether it was, the program we opened in Big Data in San Francisco, or the campus in Italy, or now Division I athletics, I think of the scene when every time Robert Redford and Paul Newman are being chased by a posse throughout the movie, same posse, each time they turn around and they say, who are those guys? So I want people to constantly be asking about us, who are those guys? What? And that's why I was thrilled that we could hire Shane, and I know he'll get us where we need to go. And so the people will be saying, who is that guy? And what is he done here?
So between the two of you, who's Butch and who's Sundance?
He's the one that gets Catherine Ross. I'll be the one that gets Catherine Ross. I think that's Robert Redford.
You can't go wrong either way. Either you're Robert Redford or Paul Newman. That's a win in my book. I think that's a great note to end on. I know we have our Deputy Provost, Glenn McGee, waiting in the wings. President Kaplan, happy Founders Day. Thank you very much for everything that you have done for the University of New Haven in your time as president. And thank you for everything you're doing for us during this time of crisis and your leadership. And thank you. And we look forward to seeing you again real soon on campus when we're all back together. It's been great to meet you virtually. I look forward to meeting you in person. And I know Dr. Z is such a big fan, and it's easy to see why. I'm a big fan of yours as well, now that I've had a chance to see and talk to you. So thank you for everything. We're glad you've joined us here on the Dr. Z and J-Dub podcast.
Thanks, J-Dub, for your kind words. Thanks for hosting this. And I'm with you. Let's get back on campus and meet in person. Take care.
Sounds good. Sounds good. We look forward to seeing you soon. All right, before we bring out our next